Hey everybody, welcome back to Marvel Monday. I'm your host, Surprise, and I'm so excited to finally get back into some Marvel content. I'm also super excited that we have some Marvel content to get back into. Of course, what is the Marvel content we have to get back into? It's WandaVision. Let's get right into talking about it. First thing I wanted to talk about was how very excited I was to start this, but I didn't realize just how much I had missed Marvel content until I pushed play and the opening crawl started. I don't know if you'd call it a crawl or a flip or what you'd call it. I call it the crawl, probably because of Star Wars, but anyway, that's not the point. The point is how as soon as I pushed play and it started and that music started, I burst into tears. It's been 18 months since we got any Marvel content, and it was so needed and so great. I can't even describe the feelings that I got. And that says a lot about what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done for us. That they've been able to make content that gets such a reaction out of their fans. I mean, I've said it before, but when some of their worst movies are still some of the best comic book movies ever made, that tells you the quality and the emotional response that you're going to get from having such a long drought in between. Speaking of that crawl, I love the addition of scenes from Infinity War, Endgame, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Captain Marvel. That really just made it that much better. The live audience idea, I wonder if that's a nod to the fact that the townfolk are living in this are basically actors in whatever's going on. I feel like, now of course they got Deborah Jo Rupp, who plays Mrs. Hart, to come on because she was actually one of the few actors that they had that had comedy or sitcom experience. So they definitely wanted a sitcom vibe, but they also definitely wanted a live audience, and they wanted somebody that knew how to react to the live audience correctly, to pause for the live audience and the laugh and things like that. Believe it or not, that does take a skill set. And while we don't have sitcoms that have live audience reactions anymore, that makes it even more necessary to have a actor that knows how to respond to those kinds of things, because there is a pause if you watch those kinds of shows. I noticed one of the very first things she does is fix the broken plate. I thought that there may have been some significance to that. I also wanted to say that before I get too far into this, that some of the theories or ideas that I might talk about here, or some of the Easter eggs that I saw, I definitely can't take all the credit for them. I got some of that from sites like Screen Crush and New Rockstars, and also some of the reactors that I watch like Heroes Reforged and some of the other ones. I'll even link some of them in the description below so that you can see some of these amazing reactors and Easter egg finders and sources like that. I did notice that there are no stairs at the beginning of the episode when she opens the door for Agnes. Well, at least if there are stairs, they're hidden very well behind the wall. And then when the scene goes from Vision at work back to the house, it's definitely a one-story house. Now, of course, that plays significance later on in the fact that there are stairs and it is a two-story house. So obviously the house is changing, which, I mean, it's obvious that the house is changing. You can see it in every episode that the house looks different, and I think even in the trailer they show Wanda literally changing how the house looks with her powers. It's so subtle at first, but it's definitely noticeable. Now I'm going to jump around a little bit talking about the episodes, but I'm going to try and stay as in order as I possibly can. I even rewatched the episodes to get notes and to get a better feel for what I was talking about. This isn't a reaction. This isn't really a in-depth breakdown. This is just me noticing things and talking about things and maybe throwing some theories out there. Speaking of which, the Stark toaster ad, now obviously it's the same actors. You don't know this the first time you see it, but it is the same actors who play in every commercial, and there are significance to each of the commercials. There has to be. They wouldn't have just put them in. They wouldn't have done any of this just accidentally. I saw some of the people that I watched talking about this. They said that there's definitely no accidents and that they have a very short amount of time to put information in. Now, I realize that if you take the span of, I guess this is going to be 9 episodes long, and assuming that they're all about half an hour each, that's 4.5 hours. So yeah, they have time to put things in, but at the same time, every episode is only 20 to 30 minutes. I don't think they're going to waste time with information that doesn't mean something for the most part. Now, they're going to have some things in there, some of the sitcom elements, some of it's going to be a little silly and in there for no reason, but for the most part, I feel like most of it is in there for a reason. The Stark toaster ad being one of them. Of course, one of the significant things that I noticed right away was the fact that when you pushed the button down, it sounded like Iron Man's suit charging up. Wanda and Pietro in Age of Ultron talk about how the Stark bomb sat there in front of them and they just waited for 2 days for it to explode and kill them. Any movement of the rubble could have fallen on it and killed them. And of course, the whole commercial after you push the button down, the red light is blinking, which, by the way, that's the only color you get in the first episode. But the red light is blinking and you're just waiting for it to pop. There has to be significance to that. That's definitely Wanda's PTSD from that situation being displayed in a creative way. Another one of the theories that I cannot take full credit for, but some of it, I thought that it might be something else coming into play, but I didn't know all of the details, it's possibly Mephisto might be Ralph, Agnes's husband. Now, that might not be anything, it might just be a misdirect or something like that, but the fact that the anniversary is June 2nd, and that has something to do with the Salem witch trials, which of course she is the Scarlet Witch, that he likes baked beans, which there's something about the devil liking baked beans or something like that. Again, I don't know all the details, and this isn't all me, but all of that leads you to believe that there's definitely something more to what's going on in the town and with Agnes and possibly even Ralph, especially since you never actually see Ralph, not to this point anyway. Also, when things go wrong, I notice that the audience goes silent. There's not really any gasps or reaction from the audience. It's all as if the live audience idea just completely disappears. And when Mr. Hart starts choking, Vision is scared to do anything until Wanda tells him to. I don't know if that's significant or not, but I thought it was interesting at least that he looked like he was waiting for Wanda's permission to do something. Was that because it was Wanda controlling the situation, whether Vision's real or not, or is it something else? But he definitely waited for Wanda to say to do something before he did something. And he almost looked apprehensive or in fear of what was going to happen. And as soon as he does save Mr. Hart, they get up and leave abruptly. Is it because they're scared, or is it they're following a script? And as soon as they decide to leave, Mrs. Hart goes back into character. Even though Vision saves him, we haven't seen Mr. Hart since. At the end of the episode, when the aspect ratio changes for the zoom out to show the sword screens and the hand on the journal, that aspect ratio change is very subtle. I didn't even notice it the first time I watched it. I thought it was interesting, and it came up in the recap of episode 1 when you start episode 2, but she really stresses the words indestructible head when she says it. Like, she says it, I don't know, there's definitely a stress on the words indestructible head. And now that she mentions it, it kind of bothers me that Vision is made from vibranium, which is an indestructible metal, a earthbound metal, but it's still an indestructible metal. But Thanos is able to pluck the stone out with his bare hands. And yes, his blade destroys Captain Shield in Endgame, but that weapon is obviously special to be able to do that and spin the way that it does. Thanos' hand, while he's very strong, obviously, because he can beat up the Hulk, I just thought it was interesting that a indestructible metal was so easily destroyed for Thanos to be able to pluck the gem out of Vision's head. And then she says indestructible head, almost like, I don't know, it's almost like it's a conjure or a spell that she's casting. Also thought it was interesting the way that the scene got very dark during the danger of episode 1. The whole episode had a certain lighting to it, but almost as soon as he starts choking it looked a little darker. It looked almost like a Hitchcock movie or something like that, or a Twilight Zone episode. But then after the danger was gone, it went back to a lighter sitcom type color and shade, hue, whatever you want to call it. But there's definitely a difference in the saturation. Another thing that comes up at the beginning of episode 2 especially is the hexagons. They are just too prominent to not be important. Now, this gets brought up later in episode 4 where Jimmy writes it on the whiteboard, but there's got to be something to the hexagons. Why is everything hexagonal shaped? And the interior is definitely different. Where there was a hallway, there's now a door and a staircase. There's still a hallway there, but that door wasn't there before. Before it was just a hallway and a little wall partition. Now there's a door, another hallway, and then the stairs. So the interior is absolutely different in every episode. Also found it interesting that Agnes uses the words "the star of the show." Now, of course, she could be talking about the talent show, but it seemed like there was definitely significance to her using those words, "the star of the show." And when Wanda goes inside after Agnes says that, her interaction with the mailman is very weird and different and interesting. A lot of the phrases that are said in this episode actually are very weird and interesting, and I feel like maybe they have more significance than just being random dialogue in a show. Like, Dottie is the key to everything, or the devil's in the details. For the children. There's no children until Wanda gives birth, or at least they don't show them ever. Not to this point, anyway. They have not shown any children other than the ones that Wanda gives birth to. Another part of dialogue that seemed pretty significant was when she was talking to Geraldine and she says, "I don't even know what I'm doing here." Or when she says to Dottie that she means no harm, Dottie says, "I don't believe you." But then when Wu starts talking through the radio, Dottie almost snaps out of it and says, "Who are you?" even though she just called Wanda by name. Is it mind control, or is she maybe a vessel for something else? Because I do think that it's interesting that they bring up the fact that Dottie is the key to everything. When they identify Jones, which is her husband, they don't identify her. So that's why the vessel idea kind of pops into my head. Maybe she's more significant than we know. Maybe it means nothing. Again, sometimes this could be a misdirect, or it might not mean anything. We might be looking way too much into every single detail. But the devil's in the details. And I feel like all of that being said means something. Right after that, they go into another commercial, and the Hydra commercial saying Strucker will make time for you, and he gave Wanda her powers. Plus the audience got quiet during that creepy part again. The talent show part, I don't know if there was any significant things that happened in that. I think that might have just been a funny sitcom type scene, and it was really funny. I really enjoyed that. I feel like the show started to really gain some traction at that point and become a little bit more interesting. I know a lot of people were complaining about episode 1, saying it wasn't that good or that the show wasn't that good, but episode 2 was better, and it was definitely a better episode. But I feel like the whole thing is a story that they're telling, and I really wish people would have a little bit more patience and trust in the Marvel world, especially by this point. You know, maybe some of the movies, Iron Man 2 and 3, Thor the Dark World, even Age of Ultron, might not have been the best movies. But again, even the worst movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe are some of the best comic book movies we've ever seen. And there's been so many things that have come back up since about Age of Ultron that, I don't know, I feel like Marvel knows what they're doing and people need to trust them a little bit more. I found it interesting at the end of this episode when it starts going to color as it spins around and goes towards the kitchen. You can very clearly see what looks like the compound in Sokovia where Pietro and Wanda were on the wall. You might have to slow it down, you might have to pause it, but it is definitely Sokovia in that compound on the wall that you're looking at. Also found this pretty interesting. The show is obvious that it takes inspiration from Dick Van Dyke and I Love Lucy from the 50s in episode 1, Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie in the 60s in episode 2, and it is definitely the 70s in episode 3 with the Brady Bunch and Mary Tyler Moore homages, at least in the intro if nothing else. But Vision very clearly states it's been 12 hours since Wanda got pregnant in the 60s, and this is the 70s. I mean, the only way that's possible if it was 1969 and then 1970 would be the only way that would be possible. But it's obvious that this is switching from decade to decade, which is obviously a 10 or so year period, but it's definitely only been 12 hours since Wanda got pregnant and was 4 months pregnant. And of course, obviously she gave birth within a day or two of getting pregnant. So in episode 3, Herb sawing the wall is the first real obvious instance of a character glitching. Now, of course, having watched some of the trailers, there's definitely more instances of that. The woman hanging the laundry outside very obviously glitches, and there's been other things that might be smaller or less obvious, but Herb sawing the wall is definitely the first really obvious instance of a character glitching. And by the way, just throwing this out there, but the acting in this has been so good, especially Elizabeth Olsen. Oh my goodness. I've always thought that she was just amazing, but man, her acting in this has just been so good. Give that woman an Emmy. I just thought it was interesting that butterflies keep coming up on the calendar. In episode 1, there's butterflies, and then of course in this one there are butterflies in the mobile that she accidentally makes come to life. Not that this has anything to do with anything, but I did think it interesting also because in the game that I've played and featured on here before called Marvel Future Fight, in her best attack skill, there are butterflies in it. Now the ad in this one is a Calgon spoof. Obviously, it's definitely from the era that I grew up in with Calgon Take Me Away, which I almost expected them to say Ultron Take Me Away, which Ultron does come up later, but we'll get to that. But the Hydra soap, I do find it interesting because in the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which also that is not MCU canon after, say, season 2, pretty much when they reference Ultron happening and that they found the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are the ones that found where the scepter is and gave the helicarrier to Fury, all of this happening around the time of Age of Ultron. That was the last time that the MCU and Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were canon with each other. But 2 years later in season 4, Agent Coulson was talking about how Hydra was mind controlling using soap. Everybody kept ignoring him like he was being really silly. I mean, everything that was going on, there was definitely something going on. But the soap thing, everybody was like, yeah, no, it's not that. But here we are with this commercial in episode 3 talking about Hydra soap being part of what's mind controlling everybody. Just found that fascinating as a fan of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Obviously, I'm not talking about everything. I looked over very key moments in episode 2 with the end of how the episode ends. Her seeing the guy come out of the sewer who looks like he's wearing a beekeeper suit, which the beekeeper suit is, I'm not sure what it is, but there's definitely a nod to the fact that the AIM agents in the comics, sometimes they were joked about being beekeepers. Also, the AIM logo in the comics is hexagonal shaped. In the video game, if you played the Avengers video game, it's also hexagonal shaped in there. But one of the things that does tie into that is the fact that every time anyone almost snaps Wanda out of it, like when Vision starts to talk to her seriously in this one, or when the sword agent, we find out later it's definitely a sword agent, comes out of the sewer, something fixes it. It's a glitch. It's something, and when Darcy's watching it, you can tell something is wrong. It fixes. Is it Wanda doing that? Is it because if she doesn't finish the fantasy, Vision won't finish being revived? Is it like a gestation period of things have to cook for the right amount of time and that's why she needs to be there? I'll come back to that later, but I find that interesting, and if there's anything to that. Speaking of that, you can kind of see Monica looks like she's waking up a little bit right when she asks if Ultron killed Pietro, which the mention of Pietro and her singing the Sokovian lullaby, all of that whole end of the 3rd episode was so good and so interesting. But when she does bring that up, she says she looks like she's waking up, like somebody does when they come out of a trance or when people pretend to be hypnotized on TV, stuff like that. It definitely looks like she's waking up right before she says that. And then when Wanda says, "What did you say?" and she kind of shakes her head again and she repeats the last line that she said, almost like she's waiting for the director to give her line again and she messed up and they were just taking another take. Also, during that whole time period of episode 3, do Herb and Agnes know something is wrong because Wanda is distracted? I just feel like there's something to the fact that Wanda being distracted is when things, and this isn't just my theory, other people have pointed this out, but when she's distracted or when she's got her mind on something else, like asking Geraldine or Monica what she's doing there, why she brought up Pietro and Ultron, it's during times like that things seem to be less controlled around her. The aspect change in this one is very much more noticeable and almost creepy. I mean, it's obvious at the end of the episode of this one that they're changing the aspect ratio, whereas in the first episode, it wasn't quite as obvious until, of course, you've watched it all the way through a couple of times. Speaking of creepy, the closing credits for the 3rd episode were very creepy and ominous. That score music that they played, there was something very unsettling about the music. The opening of episode 4 is one of the best things I've ever seen. Her coming back from the snap and hearing Carol call her Lieutenant Trouble, and then all the madness around in the hospital as people were coming back. It was so good. One of the best things I've ever seen the MCU do. And to tie it into the rest of the MCU, I know they did it for laughs in Far From Home, but this shows some of the panic and some of the craziness that could come with people coming back the way that they did. Oh, it was just indescribably good. I do find it interesting that New Jersey is obviously next to New York, and upstate New York is where the Avengers assembled to fight Thanos in Endgame. And I don't know where exactly the Avengers compound is supposed to be and where Westview is supposed to be, but they are definitely close in location. New York and New Jersey are not that far apart. The East Coast, those areas are way closer than the west side of the United States. So it's not that far from each other, and so it's not that far-fetched to think that within a couple of weeks of the snap being undone by Hulk, you find Wanda and Vision in New Jersey doing something weird in the town. Speaking of that, it was really cool in episode 4 to see the other side of the story. You've seen the sitcom version of it, and you were starting to get used to that, and then they pull you back and start to show you, basically from the beginning, everything from the other side of the perspective, and how fast everything was happening, and that it was just a couple of days that the 50s became the 60s, became the 70s on the show, but in real time, like I said, it was just a couple of days. And Darcy mentioning Big Bang Theory, the Mind Stone, which gave Wanda and Vision their powers, was created in the Big Bang. So I thought that it was really neat them bringing up that it had radiation that felt like Big Bang energy. The fact that the tether becomes a jump rope, I found that really interesting and possibly significant. It became a jump rope while it was being pulled out of the... Well, it became a jump rope when he passed over the border or the line, the invisible TV screen line. But when they pulled it out, it was still a jump rope. So is that significant? Does that mean that if Vision comes out, he exists as he came out, like fixed and alive, like the jump rope did? I think that there's something to that. She acts like she doesn't know what happened at the end of episode 4 when she kicks Monica out. Almost like it wasn't only her doing it. It was obviously her doing it, and it was definitely her talking and being protective of this world that she had created, but she looked at her hands almost like she didn't realize that she was the one that had done that. I thought that was really interesting and possibly significance to that. And maybe that's why when she looks at Vision, he looks dead for a moment, because she's kind of still in that in-between state of the reality she's created and the reality that is. Also, Vision definitely knows something is wrong sometimes. Aside from episode 3, whenever he says, something is definitely wrong here, Wanda, and she kind of rewinds it, glitches it. Also at the end of episode 4, when she says that she has everything under control and walks away, he definitely loses his smile and looks very concerned before he puts his game face back on. None of the songs that they've been playing have been on accident, like the Beach Boys song where they say, "Help me, Rhonda," and right when they say Rhonda, Wu says Wanda. I just feel like none of that's been on accident, and so I found the use of the song Voodoo Child very interesting at the end of episode 4. What is it? Why did they use that song? Again, maybe it's not that big of a deal and people are just looking into every single detail way too much, but Wanda uses powers, but are they voodoo powers? Maybe they're considering them voodoo powers. Maybe she's being controlled a little bit too. I just feel like there's definitely significance to that song being used. Now, Agnes might be, and I'm not the only person that has noticed this, but Agnes might mean Agatha Harkness, because it's definitely the beginning and the end of her name. Agnes, Agatha Harkness. There's got to be some significance to that. Maybe there's not, but it just feels like there is, and there's definitely something to that character. Plus, Kathryn Hahn is one of the main stars of the show, so it just feels like there's more to it than that. Speaking of which, somebody really wants Wanda to have children. Is it Agatha? Is it Ralph / maybe Mephisto? But when they say "for the children" and everyone just mindlessly says "for the children," like they're in a trance, all the hints and references to the whole having kids, school districts, and just all the comments that they make about, do you have any children? Why don't you have children? For the children. It feels like somebody definitely wants Wanda to have kids. My big theory is that what's happening is Wanda finds Agatha. Maybe it's Agnes, maybe it's not. She's not identified on the FBI board though, so that's interesting. But she gets her help to bring Vision back. I don't know if she goes and seeks her out, or if she just happens upon her. But the town is definitely being mind controlled or held hostage to be maybe bit players in the fantasy TV show while, like I said, the gestation period happens. Maybe part of what they have to do is give it time. Maybe the spell takes time. Maybe the bringing back of vision takes time or takes a lot of power. And in order to do all that, in the meantime, they have to, I don't know what's going on exactly, but there's definitely a lot of power involved. And I feel like the town being mind controlled and being players in the show, not just in the WandaVision show, but in the TV show that is obviously being made on the show. It sounds weird coming out of my mouth, but you know what I mean. It's obviously a show being made because they're watching it in episode 4. Is Agnes the missing person that they were talking about at the beginning of episode 4? I mean, maybe, but if they have her photo op, they should know that that's the missing person. But they have identified Jones, but not his wife Dottie. I know I mentioned all this a little while ago, but I just think it's worth bringing up again because there's got to be some significance to the fact that they've identified some characters, including Jones, but not his wife and not Agnes. Most of all, I love that this is a TV series that keeps us guessing. And they're even having Jimmy Woo do what many of us are doing, which is basically having a meta storyboard up with all of the things. A lot of the things that I've mentioned are written on Jimmy Woo's storyboard. It's just, I think it's very interesting. I love what they're doing, and I cannot wait to get more. And by the way, before I end this, based off of the trailers, I don't think this is all Wanda. I feel like there's more to what's going on. Just, they feel like they're fighting their way out of it, or that they're fighting something towards the end of it by watching the trailers. And maybe it's not Agatha because they have to snap her out of it. Her and Vision's interaction of, are we dead? No, but you are. There's so much going on. I love how much this show is keeping us guessing, and I cannot wait to get more of it. Now, this is the first 4 episodes. I will be reacting to the rest of them. I don't know if I'm going to do the next 5 or if I'm going to do the next 3 or the next 2. I'm going to split it up possibly, but I might just leave it all for the next 5. I doubt it though. I'm probably going to split it up. I'll probably do the next 3 and then I'll do the final 2 episodes. So look for that, and I hope that you're enjoying this show as much as I am. I hope that you stuck with it and didn't give up on it like some people did. Tell me in the comments below what you think, your theories. Are you enjoying the show? Hope that you've enjoyed Marvel Monday coming back. And if you have enjoyed this, be sure to like and subscribe. I am Surprise, and until next time,
have a good one.